and welcome back to the Knitting Page channel. If you're new here, my name's Paige and I'm the face behind the Knitting Page. Today I have a short, fun video where I'm going to talk about spring trends I have been seeing in the knitting world. This video is biased, it's based on what I've been noticing, and it's based on my algorithm. But just prefacing that before I get started. So, the first trend I have been noticing is the color of spring 2025, and that is smoothie green. Sandus Garn has come out with a colorway called Matcha. Its color, by the way, I have my laptop right here. If you see me looking down, that is what I'm doing. But it's colorway 9564. But I think when I saw this color, I've been seeing it in multiple different pieces. I'll add some throughout this video and while I'm talking about it. But when I've been seeing this color, the vision that comes to mind is a smoothie or a green juice. Matcha is, of course, also this lovely color, but to me, I am more so a smoothie gal than a matcha gal, and so smoothie green is what came to mind. I've been seeing it. Petite Knit has a new design with probably some slip stitches down the center. There's some lovely pieces of green with that. I've been seeing it just used throughout the knitting world. I think it's a really lovely color. I think it kind of plays on the Sunny Lime colorway that was popular a few years ago, but as the name entails, Sunny Lime has a bit more of a yellow hue to it, where this is like a pure wheatgrass, spinach, banana mixture for a colorway. And I really like this color. I don't know if I will be knitting it this spring because this year I just really would like to use up stash yarn. I have some green on hand that if I bought a darker mohair, I may achieve something like that. But right now it's not really fitting into my plans, but I do think that it's a lovely colorway. Last year we saw the moment of the butter yellow. I am wearing the mixed rib camisole by Florence Miller in the shade Dusty Banana that I knit last year as a test knit in the Knitting for Olive Cotton Merino. I have still been seeing lots of butter yellow throughout the knitting world as well, but a new color that has repeatedly been popping up is the smoothie green. Another trend I have been seeing is micro stripes. Spectacle Streak, I feel like, has been all over my Pinterest and all over my Instagram it is the stripe overload turtleneck that I feel like has been popping up everywhere. I'm even looking at a picture right now that includes a smoothie green and a light purple. But I think this micro stripe trend isn't just unique to Spectacle Streak. Coco Amour has a new sweater coming out. I think the Olga sweater and the Olga jacket, although slightly thicker stripes, still has that more thin stripe than some big color blocking. I've been seeing some on my Pinterest, for example, some tops that have been done in a striped pattern where you are having more of these micro stripes. This is something that I think I would like to play with this spring and summer. I have always gravitated towards pinstripes. I have 3 different blue and white pinstripe dress shirts that I wear to work. Honestly, I have a vision in my head of knitting this top, doing micro stripes, or doing thicker stripes with micro stripes in a navy and a pink that I have in my stash, and I feel like that would be super cute. But seeing these little micro stripes I feel like has been popping up for a while, and while scrolling on my feed it's just something that I've noticed time and time again, and so I wanted to include it in this video. Spectacle Streak also has, they have a whole series of patterns, one of which is the stripe overload polo tee as well, which has these cute little fun stripes. I think it's a fun way as well, especially as I'm thinking about using up stash this year, and that doing micro stripes is a nice way to get some yarn out of your stash if you don't have a full garments quantity. If you have similar quantities of the same weight yarn, then it's a good way to get that out and use it in a garment rather than an accessory if you are more of a garment knitter. Another trend I have been seeing is chunky cables. I probably also have a bias towards this because I'm currently knitting the tulip sweater by Other Loops, but the tulip sweater and the whole tulip design by Other Loops is a pattern that I think plays on this chunky cable. I know Emily from High Fiber Knits is knitting her like dream cable sweater, which again is this like very chunky cables. And when I mean chunky cables, I mean that they have like largely spaced out and they're really like wide versus a more tighter cable. I feel like we are still seeing a lot of tighter cables where we're getting more of that like traditional fisherman's rib where you have the crisscrossing back and forth, but this like wide cable is something that I've seen throughout the knitting world. The tulip sweater and the tulip vest and the whole tulip series is of course like kind of the main one that I'm biased towards because I'm currently working it up. But another one I've been seeing is a pattern that is coming out, and it is the Louise blouse by We Made Wardrobe. It's a double-stranded mohair chunky cable blouse, and I think it's very beautiful, and it kind of gets this trend and this pattern that I'm seeing like in a piece. I think it would also be a great one to transition into the spring because it's knit out of 2 strands of mohair, so it would be a lighter weight piece instead of like a very like worsted weight wool sweater. I'm also seeing some vests. There's one in particular that I'm scrolling to try to find. This is the Harper vest by Sandnes Garn, and it has this giant chunky cable as well as some smaller cables. But in my upcoming podcast video, I wanted to share about my experience knitting the bully sweater, not the bully sweater, knitting the Billy sweater by Sari Nordland. And I am personally really loving the look of cables, but I made a huge boo-boo in my Billy sweater that I will talk about in my upcoming podcast, and I am personally over knitting a very complicated cable pattern, and I wanted something that was a bit of a palette cleanser to use up some of my yarn. But the nice thing about knitting these chunky cables is that you're not cabling a lot. When they're very spaced out, you're really only cabling on those like say every like 10, 12, 16, 20 rows rather than cabling like every other row or every 4th row or every 8th row. You're just getting these larger intervals of cable. So it's a really addicting knit, which I see its appeal both from an aesthetic standpoint. I think that it's like a fun look. And then also from like a process knit standpoint, sometimes I feel like with a cable sweater, I can get in the flow, but it takes me a little longer and a little more thought, where when the cables are more spaced out, you can get into a good flow and it becomes like, okay, let's just knit to the next cable. And kind of as like we continue to say like this like popcorn chippy type of knitting process. But I think seeing these cables is something that I've seen throughout, and like scrolling on Pinterest, you're getting these like very oversized sweaters with more chunky cables rather than it being super tight. And there's also a lot of positive ease when it comes to these garments rather than them being super close to the body. Another trend I'm seeing that plays on our thin stripe trend is noticing the mix of stripes and eyelets and doing some stripes and some lace. One sweater that came to mind is another one by Other Loops. And again, maybe I'm just a big Other Loops fan, but the lace loop sweater by Other Loops, there's also the lace loop tee, is again this play on like stripes and eyelets. The lace loop sweater in particular has like lots of thin stripes and rows of eyelets, which I think is a really great way again to transition into spring. I am planning to do a spring and summer sweater video because this is, I don't know, I just don't wear my spring and summer knits as much as I wear my sweaters and my cardigans. And I feel like that's kind of unanimous across the knitting world. Maybe you're an exception and you only wear your summer knits, but I tend to gravitate towards my chunkier, warmer knits. And so being able to knit something that does have a little more versatility, such as knitting a wool sweater with some eyelet lace in it so that it is a bit more breathable, is something that like I'm intrigued to see how much wear I would get out of it. But the lacy loop sweater by Other Loops is one that I'm like, micro stripes and eyelets, very fun, very practical, I feel like, for the spring. petite knit. It's not a sweater, but it is a top that is coming out, and it is the Ida tee. And again, it is another mix of stripes and eyelets. And of course, these are two like relatively large designers. I feel like when it comes to trends, that's kind of where we look to set the stage. And like petite knit will do like a pop of red, and then you'll see pops of red everywhere, whether it's her or her test knitters. And I do kind of feel like there's like a trickle down effect for what like the big movers and shakers of the knitting world are doing. And two of them, petite knit and other loops, both have this like stripe and eyelet trend. And again, I think there's practicality to it in terms of not needing as much yarn and being able to incorporate some of those leftover amounts or odd like yarn amounts into a garment via these micro stripes. For the spring and summer, there's practicality with some air circulation due to the eyelets. And then from like a process knitting standpoint, it is just like potato chippy, and you do just want to keep knitting and knitting and knitting until you get to that next section. The lacy loop sweater is one that I could see myself like going through my stash and finding some yarns to work to make this, because I don't know, I feel like it'd be really cute on the beach. And as a teacher, I got lots of time on the beach that I can spend in the summers. Like I said, I was gonna keep it short and sweet, and that is what I have noticed. Maybe you have noticed some other trends, but these are ones that I have noticed and that I would like to play with in some way, shape, or form. So we got our smoothie green, which is the color that I've been noticing for spring 2025. We have our micro stripes. Again, I'll make sure to include some photos throughout. We have our chunky cables. Again, I'm biased. I'm knitting the tulip sweater and loving it, and I'm also seeing this throughout. And then of course we also have our stripes and eyelet trend. So that is all for today. I hope you liked this video. It was fun to compile it and sit back down and film one of these trends video, which I have not done in a very long time. So keeping it short and sweet. Till next time, bye.